And I'd love to chat with you personally. I'm going to come over to Cedar Ridge in 7 minutes at the back afterwards, and so I'd love to meet you if you are new here. Well, I'd love to meet you if you're not new as well, but I'm going to particularly go over there this morning. So we are in a series, it's Lent at the moment, so we're in our Lent series, which is called Sharing Life Stories, and it's all about finding meaning, connection and purpose. That's the subtitle. We're in week 5 at the moment, and this morning is going to be about sharing our dreams. So we're going to be talking about dreams and purpose and that kind of thing. We'll have Easter in a couple of weeks, and then after Easter we're going to have another discipleship series where we're actually going to come back to some of those issues we looked at a few weeks ago in the book of Amos, social justice issues. You may remember we had to postpone the panel on racial justice from when it snowed, one of those weekends when it snowed. So we're going to be doing that again right after Easter and talking a little bit more about issues to do with social justice again. So that's all coming up after Easter. But right now, we're in this series, and a key aspect of this series has been the issue of vulnerability. We've been talking about how much benefit it can be to us and to others when we begin to kind of let our barriers down a little bit and open up and share more about our life together, share more of our stories. Some of those stories may be kind of feel painful to share, some of them aren't, but they help us as we begin to share them to have a renewed perspective on our own story, our own life, and also they can be really empowering to somebody else and help them see their story in a different kind of context. And I think this is true for all of us. We all have a backstory, right? All of us. It's interesting that we've been talking about how some of these issues affect younger people. We often, what we do in here on a Sunday is replicated in a different kind of way with our youth groups and our children. And some people have sort of said, well, kids don't really have a backstory so much. Well, my kids have a backstory. My kids definitely have a backstory. And, I've got a picture here of my two youngest kids, George and Oliver. Okay, and they look like pretty clean-cut kids, right? They're English, but they look all American kids to me. But here's another shot from some of their. Okay, so sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's they fortunately with some major rehab they were able to get through this phase. But everybody has a story, right? We all have a story, and some of us want to keep that story quiet. But our stories are with us whether we like it or not. So now a few weeks ago I shared about how I shared my story, a story of how what I thought was failure, a particular period of my life. I'm not going to tell the story again, but how I related a period of time that I thought was kind of failure, and I remember sharing that with somebody and saying how I felt I failed, and they were saying, man, I don't see it as failure, I see it as you persevered. It's amazing that you are still here, that you pressed on through that situation. And that kind of turned me around and helped me to see my own story in a different kind of perspective. Well, this morning we're going to kind of look further ahead. We're going to talk about purpose and our dreams. We all have a sense of what the future might be, right? We all have a sense of where we would like to go. Probably for most of us, we are not necessarily right where we want to be or where we expected to be. As we talk about purpose, I ought to mention also that there are workshops accompanying this series, and on Saturday, this Saturday coming, so that's what, the 28th, Mike will be leading a workshop over in the barn Saturday morning, all around this issue of kind of uncovering our purpose, perhaps recapturing some of our dreams, some things that may have been lost. And I think that's very relevant for us because probably most of us, have at least had some kind of struggle with that. It's really kind of interesting to take stock of where we're at the moment and where that compares with where we would like to be, or maybe even where we thought we would be 10 years ago. If we asked ourselves that same question 10 years ago and said, if we were able to go back in time, would we think we'd be here right now? For some people that could be a really exciting question, but for others that might be a depressing question, right? 10 years ago I didn't think I'd be quite in this situation. Well, the truth is, probably for all of us, life has not worked out the way we planned, right? And I can honestly say, that life has not worked out the way I planned at all. In fact, I would say pretty much all my goals, plans, purposes, and etc. have changed over time, and where I am now is it can almost feel like an accident. In fact, sometimes I drive around, like, I come from England originally. I'll sometimes be driving around. This isn't a joke. I'm not building up to a joke here, by the way. I'll be driving around, and I just suddenly think, what the heck am I doing here? I told you it's not a joke. I don't mean it like a joke. It's like, because I sort of grew up in England, and if somebody said to me, oh yeah, you'll be in the sort of Washington, D.C. area, I had no sort of connections with that. I had no idea I'd end up here. But, things happen, right? And we kind of follow our lives along, and it doesn't always go according to purpose. Now, as I said, Vike's going to be talking at that workshop and going through some exercises and some processes with the people in that workshop around kind of uncovering our purpose, perhaps getting back to some of the core things that really matter to us, perhaps helping us see how we may have let go of some dreams, some things that really kind of define us in some way, but perhaps we've been distracted from those or put off from those things because people have told us, oh, that'll never happen, or you're not good enough to do that, or you can't accomplish those kind of things. And I really want to encourage you to go to the workshop. I'm going to take a slightly different approach this morning. And rather than come up with, like, you know how you can buy these books, like these 7 steps to accomplishing your dreams, or the 7 irrefutable steps to accomplishing your dreams, right? Well, somehow when you look at these things, they're bogus. It's like, life's just not that simple. Well, we're not going to take that approach, but what we're going to do this morning is look at kind of step back from this issue of purpose, if you like, step back from this issue of dreams, and think through, okay, what do our dreams tell us about ourselves, or perhaps more importantly, what does the fact that we may not have got where we wanted to get, or maybe we have got where we wanted to get, but what has that done to us, or what does it say about us? What's going on inside? What's the deeper context of some of these things? And as a sort of way into that, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about some of my stories. So I shared, what was it, 3 weeks ago, about how I went on this sort of journey from, I was living in England, I was a medical doctor there, and then I ended up moving to Cincinnati and became a pastor there. Okay, that's a bit of a big jump. There is a story, and I shared a little bit about that. So there I am in Cincinnati back in the mid-90s, and I stayed there with my family. We had a couple more kids there, George and Ollie, the guys you saw up there, they were born there. We spent 7 years there, 7 wonderful years. I was a pastor in the Vineyard Church there. That was the movement that we were part of. And it was a really wonderful church, a very successful church in many respects. We grew very rapidly. In fact, at our peak, we got to about 7,000 people. All right, so that's quite a few people. And believe it or not, initially our building only seated 450 people. So get this, we did 8 services a weekend. And we would kind of ship them in and ship them out. And, and it was here's the deal. By the time you delivered your last message, it was perfect, because you did the same message every time. And occasionally I had out-of-body experiences where I'm like talking and thinking, sort of watching myself talk. It was because you've done it so many times. It was weird. It was a very weird thing. But it was wonderful, really exciting, really great. And we eventually moved into a much bigger facility, and we'd have a couple to 3,000 people in the room when we did our services. We were able to cut down to 3 or 4 services. Really, really great experience. But I always felt that we would move, and my wife Lisa, and I both together felt like we would move back to England. And we kind of had this dream that we would move back to England and do something similar in England. Now, in Cincinnati, I wasn't the senior pastor there, but I was set up to be the next senior pastor in that church. So, from a career point of view, there was a nice sort of pathway there, but it just didn't kind of seem right. And we had this other dream. And then back in the early 2000s, an opportunity opened up for us to move to Exeter, which is in England. There was a vineyard church there, part of our movement, where the pastor of that church was leaving. I didn't quite know all the details. I'll share some of those in a moment about why he was leaving, but he was leaving, and so we kind of began to explore this situation. Now, as I mentioned, my role in Cincinnati was I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. I actually, one of the things that I was responsible for was helping people from other churches kind of learn and understand some of the ways in which we did church and ways in which they thought was successful, because we'd got so many people. And I got invited pretty much literally all over the world to speak. So I traveled a lot, did a lot of that kind of stuff. It's really interesting, actually. Since I left that church, I don't think I've had a single invitation to speak anywhere else. Apart from, I shouldn't play that down. I did get invited to speak to the Burnsville Gardeners Club. Don't laugh. Okay, that was very important. The Burnsville Gardeners Club. Seriously, that's the only speaking invitation I've had since leaving that church. Okay, I spoke about beekeeping. That was a couple of years ago here. Really great. It was a great time. I highly recommend Burnsville Gardeners Club. Great association. I was the youngest by maybe 40 years. But it was a lot of fun. However, I really enjoyed my role. But clearly, my role, right, why was I invited to speak at all those places? And then after I leave that church, I don't get invited anywhere. Clearly, it's nothing to do with me. It's because of what I do, right? There's a certain sort of kudos that goes with what you do. And when that gets taken away, or you let it go, some of that gets lost, and that can affect your identity. Well, that kind of happened to me a little bit. Let me explain. So I go to Exeter. So we've got this dream to see this amazing church develop in Exeter. I get there, and the church there was about 300 to 400 people, and the guy's leaving. He's a Canadian, actually, and he's going to leave and go back to the States. His wife was American, and he's going to start another church in the States. Day one, we found out, or I was sat in a pub having lunch with them. I found out firstly that there were pretty significant financial problems, like on the indiscretionary side. Okay, so now I got some hints about that to start off with, but I didn't realize it was quite as bad as it was. Then he informs me that there's one other person on staff in a sort of administrative oversight role, that person was a convicted pedophile. So, and I remember thinking, that would have been handy to know before I took the job, right? But he said, but it's fine, it'll be fine. But this person had oversight of some things that involved children, and so I'm thinking, no, that's not fine. That's not fine at all. And so I'm sort of going through my mind thinking, I'm going to have to deal with that situation, and nobody else knows about it, and probably I'm going to have to get that person to step down, because that's not an appropriate role for them to be in, and there's going to be a lot of misunderstanding. Anyway, I'm sort of thinking things to do. Anyway, there's loads of different things that just were not a very good situation. And I quickly learned that everybody was really happy that this guy was leaving, and was greeting me like I was the second coming of Christ or something. It was like, we're so glad you're here, and of course what you're going to do is what you did in Cincinnati, and so we're so glad. Thank you very much for coming. And that lasted for about 3 weeks, and I'll explain what happened. Somebody, just before I arrived back in England, somebody in the church went missing. It was a really, really sad situation, and they actually, about 2 weeks later, they showed up dead. And they really sadly taken their own life. It was another very horrible situation. So the pastor who I was taking over from, we had this 3-week overlap. He said to me, look, I will do that funeral. You didn't know this person, I'll do that funeral. That'll be the last thing I do, and then we'll kind of tie some loose ends up, and then I'll be heading back out to the States. So I said, that's great. Next day, I get a call from the church treasurer, an older lady, to tell me that the pastor that I was taking over from had just dropped down dead of a heart attack. So this was an amazing 2 weeks, so I was like, you've got to be, and the way she told me, she said, I don't know if you've heard this expression, so-and-so has gone to be with the Lord. Have you ever heard that expression? Oh, yeah. So she said, I'm just calling to let you know that, I won't mention his name, X has gone to be with the Lord. What? And that's like what you say about somebody in their 90s, who's been, imminently about to pass away. You mean the guy who was leading the church? Said, yes. I went, what? And he had died of a heart attack. Now, the funeral for the other chap was 2 days later, and there wasn't enough time to get them word out that the pastor, my predecessor, had died. So I show up at the funeral. I've got to do the funeral now. I show up at the funeral, and the first thing I have to do is announce the fact that I'm here because the person who should have been doing the funeral is themselves dead. I know you don't want to laugh because it's sort of so macabre, but it was just it was just kind of bizarre, one of those bizarre things. So this is 2.5 weeks into the job, and now what transpired after that was that we did everything. We had a memorial service for the pastor. We kind of got through that period of time, but things changed. Rather than me being greeted as the second coming now, a lot of people felt very guilty about the way they had treated this guy previously. And anything I did to change anything, which, the plans were probably going to mean quite a bit of change, anything I did to change anything was viewed as being sort of disrespectful to the memory of the guy before me. So it was kind of like a lose-lose. I can do anything. I can do anything without it really upsetting and offending a significant number of people. There was a group within the church who were kind of very positive about the change process, but most were not, and it kind of was dividing the church. And in fact, we went away on summer vacation, and the worship leader while we were away, led a service of repentance for the direction the church was going in. Where's the worship leader? I always find, so you think, that doesn't bode well. Anyway, I decided to say to that community, I said, look, I think if you could choose again, you would choose somebody different. And they said yes. So, I said I'd offered my resignation, and I resigned for that role. Now, I still, that was desperately disappointing. Firstly, because, I felt a bit of a chump having moved my whole family back across the water. And really within a few days realized, oh my gosh, this was a big mistake. But more than that, it felt like going into the wilderness. Like I'd been in that profession, this ministry, for over 10 years, and it felt like here's the deal. My identity was wrapped up in it, right? I really felt who I was as much to do about what I did and where I did it and the degree of success I had doing it as to anything else. So to fail in that way, or at least for that to come to an end, felt really difficult. It felt like going into the wilderness. It felt like I was becoming a nobody. In fact, I remember calling one of my friends. Now, I was about to go back into medicine, so I went back into medicine for 2 years, and it wasn't like a glorious return to medicine because I'd been out for 10 years, and you don't get to go back in at the same level you came out at in, right? So, so there was even that was kind of a little tricky, but. I remember talking to my best friend back in Cincinnati and actually asking him a ridiculous question, and this was just before I resigned. I said, would you still want to be my friend if I wasn't in ministry anymore? And of course he was like half offended, half mad at me, half just, oh, you idiot, complete idiot, because what's that got to do with our friendship? Whereas for me, I was thinking, yeah, but our friendship has been based on kind of working together and all this kind of stuff to do with church. That's my, become my kind of arena, my profession. And would you still, really what I was asking was, if you strip all that away, do I still count? Do I still matter? Am I still significant? And this issue of significance, I think, is really a big deal when it comes to purpose and goals and dreams and ambitions and all that kind of stuff. Because I realized that so much of what my dreaming was wrapped up in my issues of significance. For instance, I didn't even really enjoy all that much going and speaking at all these different places when I was in Cincinnati, right? Firstly, I always get a little bit depressed when I'm away from my family. I've mentioned this many times before, I'm on the whole a fairly shy person, so I find it difficult to meet new people, so I'm going into all these new situations all the time. And there's the kind of the stress of speaking. But I did it and sort of enjoyed it because you get strokes from it, right? It gives you a sense of significance. If you get invited to Shanghai to speak, or you get invited to Switzerland to run a conference, then it's like, hey, I must be important. Now I wasn't walking around thinking, hey, I'm really important, and I don't think I was coming across as though I was arrogant or anything like that. but I was getting my significance from that. And so when that gets taken away, and perhaps even voluntarily I sort of gave some of that up, but then actually you seem to fall flat on your face, it raises the question of who am I? And why am I trying to pursue the things I'm trying to pursue? I can remember sat in a hotel room in Edmonton. Has anybody ever been to Edmonton? It's Canada, really far north. The sun barely gets up and it's freezing cold. And I can remember just sat there thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And I had to go off and speak something. I was like, I just really don't want to do it. But I remember then thinking, what's motivating me here? So we could, during the season of Lent, ask ourselves this question. To what degree are my motivations, my goals, my aspirations, as we're thinking about this subject matter, to what degree are they really fueled by my need for significance, for my need to prove myself, for my need to prove myself to myself, perhaps, or to prove myself to other people, to perhaps peers or parents or people who have criticized me, or to a teacher back in 9th grade who said I'd never make it, or whatever it is. To what degree are my goals and aspirations fueled by that issue? Think of it another way. What if we were just to take that issue of significance away completely? What if we felt perfectly safe, perfectly significant? What if we felt just absolutely confident and secure? In what way would it change how we live and what we do? In what way might life be different? In what way might it affect even what we think should happen in life? Because as I was saying, most of the time, in my experience of life, my purposes, my plans, my goals have not come about. And let me just say, I'm really happy to be here, but I didn't plan to get here. Right? It wasn't so this isn't the culmination of a 30-year plan where one day I will get to, it's sorry. It's kind of an accident in some respects. But probably you could say that the fact that you're here right now to some degree is an accident, right? So we're all in this together. Let's look at a quick scripture here, because we ought to bring the Bible into this somehow, right? So Psalm 37, has anybody ever read Psalm 37? Beautiful psalm. It starts off actually, this is verses 3 and 4, it starts off talking about don't fret, don't worry, and in particular don't look at successful people and get all uptight and worried and then start living your life like you're trying to be them or like in their shadow. And then it goes on to say this in verses 3 and 4. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart. Okay, and that's verse 4. Delight yourself in the Lord and He'll give you the desires of your heart. It's a kind of famous verse actually, and this is where it's from, Psalm 37. The inference being, okay, we have all these desires, we have all these goals, we have all these wishes. Delight yourself in God, in the moment, right now, and those things will come about. But I think the verse 3, the one before it, is perhaps more poignant. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Here's what when I resigned from that role in the church, and there was a window actually before I went back into medicine, a few months. But even when I went back into medicine, I felt like, who am I? And can I still be faithful? Can I still be faithful? Am I still the same person? Even though things haven't worked out the way I think they should be, even though this isn't my goal. I'm not living my dream right now. This is not what I thought life was meant to be about. But can I still love people? Can I still love my family? Can I still treat people that I'm working with in the same way that I would treat them as if I'd been their pastor? Can I love people in the same kind of way? Can I do good and just dwell in the land, even if that land might not be the promised land or the land that I would have chosen? Can I dwell in the land and be faithful and cultivate faithfulness? There's this sense of working at it, like in an agricultural way, so tending the land and saying, okay, right now matters. So let's think about this for a second. What if the future and the desire and the goal and the purpose and the dream is not anywhere near as important as the cultivating right now. Or what if the cultivating right now is the purpose? I mean, if we could just get away from the significance issue, perhaps, the present moment becomes so much more real and so much more meaningful, where we're not having to prove ourselves. The issue is not, am I important? The issue is, am I faithful? Am I cultivating faithfulness? Am I doing good with the people that are around me? They're not a means to an end. They're not. I'm not going to really hang out with these people or really get to know these people because I'm on my way somewhere. I've got bigger, better things to do. No, rather, right now, the people around me are what's really important. The people around me are what really matter. It's hard to imagine actually that Jesus wasn't very familiar with this psalm. I mean, he would have been he was a very devout Jew, so he would have been when he delivered his Sermon on the Mount. If we go to Matthew 6, he says some very similar things in the Sermon on the Mount, where he's talking about, don't worry, don't fret, don't be anxious. And he says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Now let me say, I am not trying to put the downer on dreams, right? Please hear me clearly. I'm not saying don't dream, because look at my life, it didn't work out, I'm not saying that at all. I think we should dream. I think and for many of us, there may be things that we've let go of and dreams that we've lost, or a sense of identity even that we've lost because we're not really being ourselves. And we need to recapture that. And as I say, I would highly recommend going to that workshop next Saturday. At the same time, what is the cause of our anxiety? If we're fretting and striving, and I've got to be that, I've got to accomplish this, and these people are standing in my way, or time's running out. I'm going to be 50 next year, and a lot of people my age start thinking time's running out, like I haven't done enough, I haven't accomplished this. Well, I thought that when I was 30. I can remember being depressed when I was 30 because I hadn't done enough in life. And now I look back and thought, well, I went to medical school, qualified, practiced medicine for 5 years, changed professions, became a pastor. That's not bad for 29. It was sort of after that it all went downhill, right? But time is not running out because we have time, this moment with people who are around us. And we have it. It's this incredible gift. It's this incredible gift. So it's not about not thinking about the future or planning for the future or aspiring to things, but it's saying what about that, or what about me seems to kind of take me from the present and drag me into the future, and sort of hang me over the future like you haven't accomplished this or you haven't done enough, and becomes this sort of burden upon us, rather than something that we can, with joy and peace, move towards. I think that's what Jesus is getting at here in many other places in the Sermon on the Mount too. Now, I'm just going to shift gears. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to mention about goals. So there's this issue of significance. When I say goals, I mean dreams and ambitions. There's this issue of significance. That's something I think would be great for us to reflect on during this Lent season as we think about our future. The other one, another couple of ones, are realism and individualism. Let's think about realism for a moment. We have to, I think, whenever we think about the future, consider what is realistic, right? What is realistic? And sometimes I think we can cling to things or hold on to things that just probably aren't going to happen. And then we're just forever depressed because that thing has never been accomplished. And it might be that we just need to let go of something. So let me give you an example. Like if David Attenborough called me tomorrow morning, you all know who David Attenborough is, right? Yeah. Famous British naturalist. If he called me tomorrow morning and said, Matthew, I've heard all about your bird spotting skills, and I'm making this nature series where I'd really love you to come and help me make it. We're going to travel all over the world, and I want you to do a lot of background research on it. We'll just kind of hang out together, maybe drink late into the night, and sort of talk nature and that kind of thing. I've got to confess, I would resign tomorrow and take that job. Okay? Now I feel a sense of purpose here, but purpose can always be trumped by a higher purpose, right? Just being honest. However, That's not all that realistic. You know, David Hutton was too old. Yeah, he wouldn't do that now. It's nothing to do with me. No, it's probably not going to happen. So, you know, if I was clinging to that as like, you know, my ambition in life, I might have to modify that a little bit. And, you know, go work at Cedar Ridge instead, something like that. You hear what I'm saying. So there's some, okay, that's an extreme example. So where we may need to kind of think, you know, am I being realistic? But here's another aspect of realism that I think is perhaps more subtle and more real. And that is how much we take on. Okay, how much we take on. And this is something we've talked about a fair bit here. And I've got to say, and I mean this with all respect, I think this is a particular challenge to American culture. I think it's increasingly the case in Western Europe too. But you guys try to do so much. Here's an example. I was back in England last year, and I got up. I left where my parents lived at about 5:30 in the morning. Got into London because I was on the train. I was going to get a train out down to the West Country. Got a train into London. I got into London about 7 a.m. Okay, so this is 7 a.m. In the capital of England. You know, one of the sort of greatest cities in the world, London, right? I mean, I think most people would say that. And not a single shop was open. Couldn't buy a coffee. No Starbucks, nothing. 7 a.m. Because everybody's in bed. You know, because that's what people do in Western Europe. They sleep. You know, and they get up at a reasonable hour, and you know they go to school at like 9 a.m. Yes, high school begins at 9 a.m. Whereas in my household, we have to get our kids out the door at like 7 a.m. and they're all sleep. You know, Oliver will confess he's half asleep in his first 2 periods. You know, now that's good. Hard work is good. But I think there's that big difference, right? If you go to New York City at 7 a.m., you would definitely get a cup of coffee, right? You know, you'd get a cup of coffee at 5 a.m. in New York City, because you know, they're just different cultures. Now, you know, that's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I think in some respects in our culture here, we want to have a fantastic job. We want great education. We want to have a great family life. We also want to have some disposable income so we can have great leisure time. We want to have fantastic relationships, and we don't want to go crazy. But you can't have all those things without going crazy. I don't think it's possible to have everything. Like we have to make trade-offs, right? We have to trade off to some degree job and family. I mean, that trade-off is always going on. For some people, it's a little less work and a bit more family. For some, it's like I need to stay home. And we have to make courageous decisions. We make courageous decisions about relationships, about what kind of income we have, you know, job satisfaction versus income, all these different things. And yet somehow, and I see this with my own kids, like in school, it's like they're almost taught that you've got to have everything. You've got to be able to do everything, have everything. That's what success is, and it's just wrong. It's not fair. It's not possible. So maybe this realism thing is partly evaluating. What do I need to let go of? I mean, what do I need to say? Man, I just can't do it. But what's really important to me? What really matters? What is the most important thing? And that could be the sort of evaluation that needs to take place as we think about what's driving us, and or maybe even what's holding us back from accomplishing what we want to accomplish. And then the third thing will be individualism. Like, it's I'll tell you a big difference to how I am now in this context, in this role here, versus how I was when I went to Exeter in England, is that I'm way more passionate and concerned here about what can we do together. And I'm not just saying that, oh, doesn't that sound cute? I really mean it. It's like much more inspiring to me to think about what can we do rather than what can I do. It's much better fun to have other people do all the work, right? No, not for that reason, but because we get to do something. And I feel like, and yeah, this is probably a younger person issue, we tend to think about what I can accomplish, our goals, ambitions, dreams, purpose, etc. is very much oriented around me and what I get to do and what I get to accomplish, and and that's fueled, I think, a lot by the culture of celebrity and publicity, and people are constantly posting what they are doing, and I'm this and I'm that, and and it's just crazy, really. You've accomplished something now just by being famous, right? I mean, you've accomplished something. It's so individualistic. It's so me-oriented. But what about if we were to take the approach of we? What do we accomplish? And the we is different from all of us, right? I mean, we have a unique we that is ours. It may be family, it may be a workplace, it may be we're on mission with some people together. Whatever it is, what if we began to think about it more collectively rather than individually? And that kind of, I think, sort of winds up with this whole sort of George Bailey thing, right? When It's a Wonderful Life, where, there's George. I'm sure we're familiar with that story. We watched that movie at Christmas time. Most of us, I think. It's such a well-seen movie. There's George with all these dreams and ambitions, and he's frustrated and disappointed because they don't come about. And yet what he realizes in the end is really his purpose was right around him. It was the people around him. It was his friendships, it was the relationships. And so it's not so much what we get to do, but rather who we get to do it with that counts. Right? We can be doing our thing, and that's our thing, in a context where we're really desperately lonely, and we don't have the kind of connection that we long for. And we come back again to this issue of the present, the moment, the context that we're in, and cultivating faithfulness. We might feel frustrated with our lives. Okay, this might be a challenge for one or two of us here right now. We might feel frustrated with our lives because we haven't accomplished much in terms of the goals we set ourselves or the dreams we had. But what about the relationships we have? What about the friendships we have? Perhaps we need to start putting more weight on those and see those as much more in line with purpose, the purpose of life, the purpose of living, much more in line with cultivating faithfulness. What if those other people became our dreams? What if, and maybe we need to think through ourselves and reflect in the season of Lent on some of the relationships that we have, and perhaps relationships that we've not invested enough in, or relationships that we've kind of overlooked, or even viewed as, well, they're just a means to an end, or they're great for now. Obviously we're very often in flux. I mean, relationships change and that kind of thing. That's perfectly normal. But can we view our relationships in a different light and see them as part of our meaning, and see them as part of our purpose? I think frequently in our education system, in the way we operate as a culture, we reduce everything down to, this affects me, what can I accomplish, rather than it being, what can we accomplish. So let's just take a moment to reflect. We're going to have communion in a moment, but let's just close our eyes a moment. I'm just going to pray and ask God to come. And I want to say again, there's nothing wrong in us having dreams and ambitions. I mean, those are really good, healthy things. So nothing I would say is to say, let's just drop them. But rather, what do those dreams and ambitions, what they are, or even our experience of them not being accomplished yet, what does that indicate to us about ourselves? Especially as we think about these three issues of significance, realism, and individualism. So, Holy Spirit, I just pray you'd come now. Open our hearts. Shine your light and your love on us. Lord, your love that is not condemning or here to criticize negatively, but rather to show us how we can become more healthy. Lord, let your love and light shine on us right now. Lord, where we're feeling insecure, where significance has a stranglehold on us and is driving us, perhaps even driving us to things that we can never accomplish and that just frustrate us more and weigh us down. Lord, set us free. Lord, where we're holding on to things that just aren't realistic, and we can breathe a sigh and let them go. Show us that, Lord. Where we're trying to get so much done. We're trying to please everybody and keep on top of everything. And Lord, where we've just overlooked relationships, maybe we've neglected them, or maybe we've just not realized how important they are, and how, even though we enjoy them, somehow they've been off-center target. They've just been like a nice add-on rather than the thing. Lord, just open our eyes to those things, we pray. Lord, I just pray for us as a community here. God, we joke about it, but there's something accidental to all of our lives. There's something random to all of our lives. The fact that we're all here right now, in some respects, is somewhat random. And yet here we are, we're together. We're this mixed bunch of people. Some of us have been here ages, some of us have just walked in the door. But here we are. Lord, help us to live with purpose. Lord, help us to live in a way that brings about life and purpose for others too. Lord, where we're weighed down, if anyone here, Lord, is weighed down, heavy under the weight of these things, just lift that burden off our shoulders, Lord, take it off our shoulders. Lord, if any of us here feels like we're a loser, like we haven't accomplished what we set out to do, or that we're a disappointment, Lord, lift that weight off our shoulders and breathe new life into us. Life that is affirming. Life that sees all that we are and that we do. Life that sees what's important in our lives. Come, Holy Spirit.